Hey Dice Gang, let's do another one of these. Let's reimagine Kara Tour. So in the Oriental Adventure supplement, D&D divided that version of Japan into two: Kozakura for Sengoku period and Wa for Imperial Japan. I reimagined Kozakura in the last episode, so I will do Wa for this one. Let's start with a bit of history. Imperial Japan is virtually all of Japan's history. Technically, the Sengoku era is still part of Imperial Japan, because the emperor is still the symbolic head of state. But the only difference is that the shogunate was weak, and the daimyos were fighting over the right to be the shogun. No, you just can't replace the emperor. He is the figurehead of the Japanese civilization. That's also partly why America won't persecute the Emperor of Japan after their surrender. But that's getting too far into politics, so I'm gonna step away. Wa in Kara Tour is based on the Edo period and all the way back to the classical Japan. But Imperial Japan is not a cultural monolith. The peaceful Edo period is obviously different to the Heian, Nara, and other earlier periods. Japan started to bring in a lot of the Chinese and Korean influences during the classical period, around the 6th century onwards. That's why a lot of the culture and architecture you see in East Asia are all relatively similar looking. So if you want to experience a really unique Japan, unlike the other Kara Tour nations, then you have to go back to their prehistory, to before writing system was imported from China and way before the first books of Japanese history, Nihon Shoki and Kojiki, were written in the 8th century. Before these books were written, information on Japan came sparsely from Chinese sources, such as the Book of Han and records of the Three Kingdoms, specifically the Book of Wei. Side note, if you're wondering why the Chinese Three Kingdoms is so popular in Japan, it is not just because it's a really awesome story. It's got deep historical tie to Japan. Cao Pi, son of Cao Cao from Kingdom of Wei, sent envoys to Yamatai and provided some of the earliest accounts on the Japanese Wa civilization. There is also a cultural tie to the Wu region of China, because most of the imported knowledge comes through this coastal region, and lots of trades were conducted through these parts too. Envoy from Yamato also claims that their kingdom was descended from Wu Taibo, an ancient king of Wu from the earlier Zhou dynasty. But that is a dubious claim. They may have just said it to gain political favor. Because writing system was introduced relatively late, the earliest Japanese histories were only written over 1,000 years later. So to get a clearer and more accurate picture, they have to rely on archaeological evidence. So much of early Japanese history feels a lot like a silent bygone world where the only connection you can make with it is through artifacts and ruins. Coincidentally, this sort of experience is something you can also find in some Japanese video games, like Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Dark Souls. Fun fact, the Guardians from Zelda is actually directly inspired by Jomon pottery, and so are other designs in the game. These games kinda prove that you don't have to find meaning solely through conversation. Unfolding a larger narrative through objects and events can also be a very powerful experience. It is the good old show but don't tell method. But of course, D&D is really a conversation-based game. How are you supposed to have a story when you don't have anyone to talk to? It will also be a pretty boring campaign if everyone has to read handouts all the time. So if not done well, it might turn into a purely dungeon crawling experience. But I actually think it is possible to have fun interaction without using NPCs. You just have to encourage interaction between the players. It can even result in a more intimate group experience when done right. The trick here is to create the right opportunity and situation. For example, imagine if one of the players is trapped in a separate room by Nurikabe, a wall yokai that traps people. And this player has the solution for the puzzle in the next room that the other party members have to solve. So the trapped player has to describe the situation to the other players, or something like that. Given time, you can imagine something more sophisticated than this, of course. So for my reimagining, I will use elements from prehistory Japan, and also folk tales like Momotaro, Kaguya Hime, and Urashima Taro. Here is a quick and dirty summary for those folk tales if you are unfamiliar with them. Momotaro is a boy born out of a peach, discovered by an old couple. When he grew up, he decided to fight a band of evil Onis at Onigashima. Onis are the Japanese equivalent of ogres. The Oni in D&D is a high challenge rating monster. But in Japanese folklore, there are strong and weak Onis. The D&D Oni may be in the class of powerful Onis like Shuten Doji or Ibaraki Doji. But for normal Onis, you may just use ogre or orc stats. Anyway, back to the story. As Momotaro was departing, his parents gave him a bag of kibidango for snack. Along the way, he met a pheasant, a monkey, and a dog. He befriended them by feeding them the snack. So together, they defeated the Onis, and Momotaro became the first Pokemon master in history. Oh, I mean he lived happily ever after. But still, you can find a lot of cultural connection to these Japanese media if you know your history. By the way, if you like history, remember to visit and subscribe to my other channel, Cool History Bros. I will eventually work my way to Japanese contents in the future, so look out for that. Kaguya Hime, the ancient simp mistress. One day, an old bamboo cutter discovered a baby inside a hollow tube of bamboo, so he and his wife raised the girl, who grew into a beautiful woman. Eventually, she gained a lot of suitors, but she rejected all of them. The emperor also tried to win her hand in marriage, but he was rejected too. In the end, people from the Moon Kingdom descended to Earth and brought her back to her real home in the moon. So she got away from all the simps and lived happily ever after. Urashima Taro is a nice dude. One day he saved a turtle from being bullied by a bunch of kids on the beach. To show its gratitude, the turtle took him to the Dragon Palace under the sea and he was entertained by a princess. He spent several days there, but when he returned, he discovered that 100 of years have passed. Before he left, the princess gave him a box that he should never open. Curious, he opened the box and puff, a big cloud of white smoke caused him to age rapidly. Apparently, what's inside the box was his old age. Ah, Japan, they love their isekai stories, don't they? Anyway, here is a reimagining of the Wa setting. One day, the player characters wakes up to find themselves in an ancient tomb, with barely any memories of their past. But one thing they are certain of is that they don't belong to this world. As they venture out, they realize that their path connects them to the underwater palace, Moon Station, Oni Island, and other interesting locales. Along the way, there are yokais they have to fight, echoes of spirits reliving the final moments of their lives, but there aren't any intelligent creatures they can have conversation with. So they will be forced to investigate the ruins and experiment with artifacts they found to gain more information. Each location contains clues of past events, some violent, some heartwarming, and even clues leading to the mysterious origin of the mega maze they are in, and the reason why the whole place is abandoned. As they progress, the characters will regain pieces of their memories, who they were in the past, and remember their homes. So you could be your typical isekai protagonist, or even a neighboring Faerunian from another continent. By solving the bigger mystery, you will be able to activate the magical device that will send you home. But now that you have all your memories back, it is up to your character to decide whether their original world is where they want to go back to, or whether they even want to become the person they were in their past. This is going to require some cooperation with the players too, of course. It means that they may have to trust the dungeon master or the dice enough to have their character's background not decided by themselves. So, like how the Japanese are trying to discover their true identity and past through archaeology, this adventure is about discovering the identity of the character they are playing. So what do you think? Is it dumb or cool? Comment below. Subscribe, like, yada yada. CJ over and out.